All right. I think I'm live. If I'm live, can you guys let me know in the chat, because I can't tell. This is my first time doing this on my own, so help me out. Hi, Dr. Magic. Thank you for coming. I started a little bit early because I really wasn't sure how this was going to work out, so I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to just give it a go and let you guys be my guinea pigs. So thank you. And thank you for coming. I'm live. Thank you, Nathan. Hi, Arseni. Arseni. Hi, Jim, Odin, Raphael, Tim. All right, thank you, Drake. So I was thinking for this first live stream, I was thinking about drawing Moonknight. So that's kind of what I had in my head. So I think I'm not going to keep you guys waiting. I'm just going to get started. As I go along, I'll zoom in on the paper a little bit so you can see. But just to start out, I wanted to just get a sense of the overall picture. So I'm drawing in his chest shape, and get his head in, and I'm just kind of thinking about what I want his position and his pose to be. I want him to fill the page, you know. You know what? I'm gonna change that. I like Moonknight with big fists, so I'm gonna go give him a big fist. And whenever I draw arms, a lot of times, especially if I really want to project the arm out toward the camera, I draw the hand first and then I connect the arm to it. Just seems to work. I don't know if there's no right way or wrong way to do any of this stuff, but I've had more success with that, so that's how I do it. Hopefully the drawing is showing up clearly. It's actually very difficult for me to see on the screen, and there's such a delay for me looking at it that we'll see. Tomek, you're learning how to draw figures at the moment? Well, thank you. Thank you. And this is a way to do it. Just draw and learn as much as you can. I've got visitors. So my son live streams video games on Twitch, and I made him take a night off because otherwise there's no way that the stream would come through. And hopefully you guys will give me a chance to kind of warm up to do it. This is, I really feel like I'm talking to myself. I'm looking at the screen, and when I'm looking, I feel like I'm talking to you guys. When I'm looking down, it's a little awkward. I'll get better. Fortnite, and that's right. Thank you, Mike. That's exactly the game he's playing. Fortnite. I don't like it. This is the worst part of every drawing, especially when somebody's watching. I really enjoy the layout process. Generally, when I'm laying something out just on my own, I shut everything off. I like to watch movies or books on tape like Audible. But when I'm laying something out, it's my head's kind of got to be a little bit more in the game. So this might be a little bit awkward. I'm kind of multitasking. I like that better, I think. Thank you, Matrix. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Jeffrey, I'm gonna finish the drawing, so this might be a little while. Hopefully you guys will be patient. It's gonna take a little bit of time. I did a video, a Batman drawing video last week, and I actually cut some parts out, especially talking while I was drawing. It slowed me down quite a bit, and I thought I don't want to have a the raw footage was 2.5 hours. It just seemed a little long. And there were some pretty good stretches where I completely just blanked. I had nothing I could think of to say at all. So I tried to cut it down to where at least I could think of something to communicate about it. Thank you, Art Jedi. Art Jedi, I have a Discord that I just started. You know what? This whole thing was an experience getting this set up. Hey, Lance, thank you for coming. Alex Xavier, thank you. Oh, Eric Groves here, thank you. I really wasn't sure what would be involved in getting this thing set up, so I wanted to add some links. I wanted to put up a link to the Discord. Maybe Eric Grove, maybe you could help with that if you wouldn't mind. I don't know how you could do that. And I actually talked to Eric about moderating my stream, and I would love to do that. I don't know how. We'll have to figure that out too. Hi, Dustin. Hi from Russia. Or hi to Russia from me. I don't know if I'm coming off the page here. Let me just move it. The name of the Discord is David Finch Artist. All one word. So at this stage, I really don't worry about if it looks like a mess, which it does, but I really like to be able to just think as much as possible on the page, and I kind of think just by moving the pencil. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm putting down actually has no bearing on anything. I'm just thinking. And I've got an eraser, so I don't mind making a huge mess. I just make sure to not press too hard. And this drawing will actually be much more clear to see very soon once I start putting down some more definite lines. Right now it's very sketchy and very light, so it's probably not showing up as well as it ultimately will in just a few minutes here. You know, I have a question actually. Would you guys like to see me pencil this? Or would you guys like to see me ink this? So if some of you can give me there's a delay. Now my wife came down. Everybody's checking to make sure that this is actually working out. I think that they're surprised that I was able to get this up and running. I'm surprised. Yes, she said, yes, we are. Ink. All right. Well, John, as much as I'd love to do both, I can't just do I can't do both. I wouldn't have time. And it looks like I got more votes for ink, I think. So I'll tell you what, the next one I will do pencil. This one I'm going to do ink. Oh, now everybody's saying pencil. I'm going to, you know what, I'll ink this one. The next one I will pencil. And actually, hold on. Telephone. Because I'm making this, you'll get to see a major part of my art process, and that is trying to find my tools. Get his belt in, his stomach. I really don't need much, just enough to, if I was going to pencil this, I would be erasing about now and then starting to put in my finer detail. Because I'm inking, I'm going to erase this down and then just start inking it. All right. Fake news, it was pencil. Look at that. I had my pen right there. So I don't know if it's visible at all right now. And I'm trying to make it as light as possible so I can barely see it, so I can keep my drawing nice and clean. But it's there enough that I can see where everything is, and it gives me enough to go on. And the nice thing with ink is it's so high contrast compared to the pencil that it really works. I think, hold on, oils. Yeah, I have done digital. I've done quite a bit. It's been a while, and at some point I'm gonna start trying to do some of that again. I don't know when that is really. My Cintiq is so old that it doesn't work very well. I think I need to find a different method, but at some point I'd like to give it a try again. All right, I'm gonna go into my camera and just zoom in a little bit. All right, let me make sure I'm centered. Seems good. All right. And for whatever reason, I always start with the eyes every time, pretty much no matter what I draw. Thank you, Dragon12. I appreciate it. Yeah, 6 Illustrate, I am going to eventually do a full pencil page tutorial, start to finish. I have actually a lot of plans to do some more formal full tutorials, step-by-step process tutorials. That's really my plan this whole time, has been to get YouTube up and running. Especially, I'm not a presenter, to say the least, so I wanted to just try and get the stuff out there and try and get comfortable. And once I really felt like I knew where I was going with it and what I was doing with it and what kind of format I wanted to use. Oh, by the way, before I forget, my live stream setup with the live chat, which is not on there, I couldn't figure it out in time, next time, but that's all by Jimmy Reyes, who has a YouTube channel. He's phenomenal. I think he's actually streaming right now, or soon, in an hour. He's an inker and a penciler. He's phenomenal. So thank you, Jimmy, very, very much. Vlaz, I certainly can do a face and head tutorial, and that's something actually that for the YouTube channel I can do very soon. It's a bit of a quicker. Doing a full page penciling tutorial is a little tougher because it's just very time intensive, and I want it to be an honest process. Like, what I really don't want to do is plan out the page beforehand and then present it as if I'm making up all these decisions and I've already made the decisions. I really want to actually make the decisions on the video, because I think it's a lot more instructive to see it, how it actually comes together, and you know, decisions actually happening. So I'm blocking everything in. My line is not the prettiest right now. That looked a little low. And I'll be able to fix it as I go. I almost treat this like a pencil. I'm really not an inker, so when I'm doing this, I just get things blocked in, and if I don't like it, I just use whiteout and clean it up. And I also find just drawing in my actual line weights and shadows and that kind of thing just naturally cleans things up quite a bit anyway. So a lot of that kind of sorts itself out. I guess that's the one benefit of using a ridiculous amount of detail is I can cover a lot of sins. Hey, Jimmy Reyes is here. Good to see you, Jimmy. I would just mention that you made my overlay, so thank you very much. That's a huge deal. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you're doing well. Dude Power, Robert Marzullo really is absolutely awesome. He's a phenomenal teacher and he's a great artist. And he's actually helped me out quite a bit with this whole process. So yeah, he's great. Oh, is Robert in here? Hi, Robert. I missed it, but I see people saying hi. So hi, Robert. Michael, you can't find me on Discord. I'll have to work on that. I'll put up a link. After this is done, I'll put up a link to it. It really was a little bit down to the wire to see if this was going to work. I really should have. I knew that I was going to do this for a few days. I should have probably tested it earlier, but I didn't. So. Hi, Luca. Thank you for coming. Greg, I do have something of a tutorial on how to build a figure start to finish. I just did a Batman drawing similar to this really last week. My wife. Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. So my wife is on the phone and she's going to read questions to me from the live stream that I may have missed. So now I'm drawing on the phone. Yeah. I saw that, yeah. Meredith, why don't you come down here? It might be easier. I can't do this on the phone. All right. Okay, I'm gonna. Okay, bye. Love you. It's a professional operation, folks. I'm getting his belt in. Just all the major things blocked in. A tutorial on metal, dude power? Yes. Tom Forsyth? I don't know how I managed to work that one out.
Dad, Mom didn't want to go, so she sent me. You want me to read them too, or?
Sure.
Like, be honest. You need help.
Sure. All right, it looks like I've got help. My son's coming to read some questions.
All right.
And I've made it so he's not able to stream his game, so you might as well help out with this. Can you read it from there, Everett?
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay.
What's your favorite character to draw?
Batman, probably. Moonknight, Wolverine. I like all the darker characters. Any character that I can add a lot of mood to with shadow is always my favorite.
Would you consider a tutorial on rendering? Mine always looks kind of muddy.
Yeah.
Tim Adams.
Yeah, Tim Adams, thank you. Yes, I absolutely would. I've got a good list of tutorials that I'm doing for shortening tomorrow. That'll be out actually on Tuesday, so that's coming up. I've gotten a lot of requests for clothing, so that's something I've got coming very soon too. So it's a matter of finding the time to. I've written down all of the ideas that I've gotten, so.
How often do you plan on going live?
Once a week, Sunday nights. Unless that changes, but once a week. I figure Sunday, if for some reason that is difficult, Sunday night.
Oh, I see Aunt Leslie in the chat. I saw her earlier.
Oh, really?
Hi, Leslie.
My sister joined the chat.
Have you drawn Spawn?
I drew a Spawn cover one time, actually, and Todd McFarlane inked it, which was a huge deal for me. It was a pretty big moment. I talked to him on the phone for an hour. I didn't get a word in edgewise.
I am 16, by the way, for whoever asked that. I want you to come and get tattooed for me. No charge, just conversations, just Ty.
I'm guessing Ty does tattoos?
Yeah.
Okay.
Seems like a lot of comic artists will drawing Batman.
Well, Batman is such a great character to draw. So, you know, I love drawing Batman. I wanted to do something different. I had just drawn a Batman last week, and I didn't want to just keep drawing the same thing, and I love Moonknight, so I thought it'd be a good choice. I've got commissions that I still need to get finished, but the ones on my list right now are all headshots. I didn't want to do a live stream of just drawing a head, so I figured I would just skip and just go ahead and just do this.
Jamie says, what are the best pens, or what pens do you recommend for inking? I find that my penciling is decent, but when I try to ink, it takes away from my drawing.
Well, yeah, I could definitely relate. There's a nuance you can get with pencil that you can't get with pen, and then there's a nuance that the best inkers get with pen that you can't get any other way, and I think it's an experience thing. But the tools that I use right now, this is a Micron 01, Pigma Micron. So I use this for all my thin lines, and then I've got this is a, I can't remember, but in my videos actually I've got all of these listed out. So I use this for my brushwork, and I've got these. This is a zebra. They're not my favorite, and these have a it's a bit of a softer tip, so I can get a bit of a thick to thin, thin to thick. And so I use those midway through, and I'll, once I get this drawn in, just my basic cartoon, I'll go to my brush, and then I'll go to this one here, and then back to this one, and we'll be finished.
Do you have any recommendations on how to study anatomy?
Yes, absolutely. Start by looking at George Bridgman. I think he's phenomenal. Oh, Jeremy Renault is here. Good to see you, Jeremy. Thank you so much for coming. A fellow Essex County-ite.
Can you do a tutorial on how to draw hands? It would be very helpful, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a great tutorial.
The hands are tricky.
They are very tricky. And the thing about hands is every different angle that you draw them at, they're totally different. they have so much movement that you study the form of the hand, you have to study it from every angle, and then you have to start learning how it moves, what the limitations are, and what you can get out of it. And the only way to do that is through study. And my favorite way of studying, truthfully, because I'm a comic book artist, personally, I think the best artist of all time for hands is oh man, put me on the spot and I can't remember my name. Joe Quesada and someone else, and I will think of it in just a sec. Carlos Pacheco. I think he's phenomenal. So much of my hand stuff is from Carlos Pacheco. All right, so I've got it basically drawn in here. Now I'm going to go ahead and erase it down just a little bit more, and I'm going to start inking. Well, brush inking.
I can do this for 5 more minutes and have to go, just saying.
Why'd you do it? My help is leaving. No, well, I'm going to be on my own. All right, I'm going to zoom back out so you can kind of see the whole picture a little bit more. All right.
What was the biggest challenge you faced on your during your career, and what did you do to overcome it?
My biggest challenge was not quitting early on. I started at Top Cow Productions. It was very competitive. I mean, it was a very supportive place, but everybody was so incredibly good. And there were people that were just learning so much faster and just seemed to not be struggling as much. And I found that very, very difficult. And I have to say, there were quite a few artists that actually did quit. They would be there one day. I never saw somebody get fired. People would just stop coming. It was very, very stressful because you really go from drawing on your own to drawing around some incredibly talented artists, and trying to measure up to them is not easy. Hi Nathan, thank you for coming.
Kenny Wang and a few others have asked if you're gonna leave this up on YouTube once.
I will. This whole thing will be up on YouTube. But don't leave.
What's your opinion on inking through digital methods compared to that of brush and pen, Luke?
Right now, I prefer brush and pen. It doesn't have the same... you can paint yourself into a corner literally much easier, so it's a little riskier, but it just feels so much more direct to me. And when I was working digitally, I was working on a Cintiq, and working on the screen was it was like drawing on glass. And I have since found out you can get overlays for your screen that give it a little texture, and so I really do want to try it out. But for me, I still think there's something to drawing traditionally that just really appeals to me.
Jose says, how do you tackle comic scripts, and would you do a tutorial on how you like that?
That one is coming up very, very soon. I'll be doing that very soon. Not next week, but maybe even the week after. I'm trying to balance what I'm getting a lot of requests for, and what I think would be, you know, really the most useful. Like gesture drawing I did last week, and I didn't really actually get a lot of requests for that at all, but I just found in my experience in helping artists learn, it's the #1 way that I've seen artists improve quickly. So I wanted to put it in, even though it's, you know, wasn't exactly able to show off any good drawing in it, and it wasn't visually the greatest video probably as a result, but I thought it was important, so I did it. And I do think that putting together a page and making visual storytelling decisions is an important video to do. So that one's coming up soon.
Is the project that you were working on before the virus still going to come out?
Yes, absolutely it is. I'm still working on it. It's gotten a lot longer. So thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Henry says, will you add the moon copter in the background?
Not this time.
Have you ever drawn Doomsday? Dark characters as power.
I have drawn Doomsday. I can't remember if I've drawn him in a comic though. I've drawn sketches. I'm pretty sure I've drawn him. It's honestly, it gets hard to remember who I haven't drawn. I drew Forever Evil and it had so many characters in it. He might have been in there. He might. I'm not sure.
Well, thank you for having me, but I must part ways now. See you, everybody.
Thank you, Everett.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm on my own. Black Knight, my best advice on drawing Wolverine is to look at Mark Silvestri. I think he draws the greatest Wolverine. And Adam Kubert. They both did Wolverine right around the time when I was just really getting into comics, and they were some of my biggest influences, especially Mark. So if you ask me, yeah, I'm going to tell you the influences that really got me into it early on. Arthur Adams is an incredible Wolverine. Ultimately, though, I would say for any character, if you understand anatomy and you can make that work, then you're 99% of the way there. And the rest of drawing a character effectively is remembering who you're drawing and who they are, what their personality is, and the way that they move. So if you're drawing Wolverine, you're not going to draw him in the same way that you would draw a Cyclops. Cyclops is much more upright and, you know, a little more stiff and rigid, and Wolverine is hunched over and feral. And he also has, I think the reason he's so popular is he's got his honorable side too. So mixing those two together and just bearing that kind of thing in mind, whenever you draw any character, the more you bear in mind who they are, I think the more lively they are on the page. Bruh boy, I have never drawn Mr. Miracle, no. You know, the advice I would have for an artist who wants to get better at composition, perspective, storytelling, those kinds of things, I would say for composition, How to Draw Comics in Marvel Way. It's a very simple book, but the composition that they have in there, I've found that there are compositional books and there are perspective books that are incredibly good, but they actually overcomplicate things to the point where it almost stops being useful, at least for me. I think you need to be able to learn a way of drawing your perspective that makes it workable to a deadline, you know, and drawing every little shape in circles in perfect perspective with mathematical calculations, it just doesn't work. So How to Draw Comics in Marvel Way is phenomenal. And Andrew Loomis has a really good book on perspective. All his stuff is available in PDFs for free online.
What was your favorite?
My favorite Forever Evil page. Wow. Christian, I really like drawing all of the pages with Bizarro. I think it's hard for me to point out exactly which page, but I loved Bizarro. I was very upset that he was killed. I argued, but I lost, obviously. I mean, it was too central to the story. He had to die for the story, but it was tough. I really wanted to see him live, so I fought for him. I wake up in the morning, walk the dog, and, you know, get that kind of stuff done, and then I generally start drawing around 9:30. I finish at 4, spend time with the family and have dinner and those kinds of things, and then I come down. I'm usually working again by about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I can work until 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 sometimes, or sometimes I'll just crash and go to bed at midnight. And then there are days I work too long, especially at night. I work better at night, and I'll end up just falling asleep during the day for a couple hours, and I lose a bit of the day. You know, I'd be better off if I parted out my time more wisely. But
excellent. I don't know if you have any tips for keeping similarly designed characters distinct looking. he notices a lot, or a lot of artists have very similar faces.
Keeping characters more distinct looking. Well, the challenge is that when you learn how to draw faces, you learn from a template, essentially. I mean, we all do. You start with a skull shape and you learn how to put together a face on that, and you practice it until it's something that really just works for you. And so it can be very difficult to naturally draw a wide range of faces. It's something you really have to fight to learn. I don't know that I'm really the best at it either, really, but for me, I really like a lot of the Disney animation, and there's some other ones too that have really great faces and great expressions. I look at some of that stuff. Play with your nose shape, your eye shape, how far apart your eyes are. You can actually play with the whole shape of your head, but when you're drawing superheroes, they still need to look heroic, and I love villains actually a little bit more than heroes, because with villains I can play with it more, and I can mess with the proportions and make them a little uglier, whereas with heroes you really have to keep them looking handsome or beautiful, and so it can be a little difficult to make them really individual. So yeah, it's a challenge certainly for me, and I don't really differentiate my characters as much as I should. So much of it though, even with the exact same figure drawn the exact same way, just like I was saying with Wolverine, whoops, I can already see a lot that I'm going to need to white out. Just the way that you move the character goes a long way toward differentiating them.
Dude Power wants to know if you've ever drawn Darkseid or Venom.
I have drawn Venom for sure. I just did a bunch of Savage Avengers covers, and Venom was on there, so I drew him there. I'm not sure. I think I've drawn him other places. And Darkseid, I don't remember.
Do you think 3 or 4 hours of drawing a day is enough to progress in them?
Yes, 3 to 4 hours a day drawing is absolutely enough to progress. And you have to bear in mind, until you're working professionally, life intervenes. So I think if that's what you're able to do, and you're doing that consistently, you will absolutely get better. It actually, more to my mind, it comes down more to the way that you learn. If you just draw pinups like this all the time, you really won't progress a lot. Like what I'm doing right now this is like an expression of what I've already learned. So I'm just drawing a picture based on what I already know. I'm not really learning from this so much. If you want to learn, you need to study anatomy specifically, and study storytelling and perspective and those kinds of things. Perspective, I do feel like actually it's maybe easier to learn in practice. I have to admit, I didn't study perspective really at all before I broke into comics, and so it was like a crash course trying to make it work. And the way that I did it early on was I would go through artists that did perspective really well, and I knew about horizon lines and perspective points, and so I would actually just kind of map out, looking at the comic, where their points were and what kind of a grid they were using, and I would use that. So I wasn't actually stealing their picture, but I was stealing their perspective grid and type of angle, and that really helped me for a little while, until I started getting a little bit more comfortable.
So someone wants to know who inspired you, like what were your inspirations, what helped you create?
My biggest inspiration early on was Mark Silvestri, and I think I really wanted to draw just like Mark, and if I could have, I absolutely would have, but I struggled with it a lot, and in struggling with it, it made me kind of Kevin, the brush pen that I'm using, I can't remember the name of it. You know what, I think it's Pentel, I know that. But I've got links to all of these, well, not links, but I've got a list of all of my tools underneath the last couple of videos that I've done. So just take a look at the other videos and you can see just the description, and you can see what they are. I forgot what I was.
About inspiration.
Oh, right, yeah. And so I started looking for some different artists just to try and find a style that would work for me. And the first artist that really clicked for me was Simon Bisley. The way he structures his black shapes, his anatomy just had like this really crazy, you know, cool look to it. I just thought it looked incredible, and it wasn't always correct, but it's amazing if it's done well. And this is something I'd really like to cover, actually. I'm a little afraid to cover it because it's a tough one, but the difference between really good anatomy and really anatomy that is technically good but doesn't really seem believable comes down to the way that you lay your shapes down, and the way that you define them. And Simon Bisley just defines his shapes in such a cool way. It was very influential for me, and it's still the entire basis of the way that I structure my black shapes is really from a couple of paintings of Slane and some of the Batman stuff that he did years and years ago.
Here's a question for you. Everyone talks about doing studies and studying, never talks about how to study. It all seems nebulous. Any tips for how to like a really structured how to study
right
or learn how to draw?
Okay, so you know what, I'm gonna break it down because there is a way to do it. The way that you learn how to draw is you give yourself blocks of a week, you know, a week to do this, a week to do that, and you have to have the patience to follow through. It can be a little difficult and you want to skip ahead, but what I would say is spend let's say you've got 3 to 4 hours a day. Spend an hour, maybe half an hour, depending on your time, but spend an hour gesture drawing and go through comics of artists that draw really great figures, just great poses and that are really dynamic, and just copy those really quickly, and it will actually sink into your head pretty fast and will really broaden your ability to draw out of your head. And then from there, learn arms, you know, learn arms from one angle, and then go to the front and go to the side, and just spend a week just studying arms, and then spend the next week studying just chests and study legs, and just go through the body that way until you have a really good understanding from anatomy books and that kind of thing of where all the muscles go. And once you do, then start drawing figures and incorporate all that. And then the next step, once you're really comfortable with, you know, where all the muscles go, you know, you have it correct. Every artist, and this is comic books, it's not life. And so I really recommend that you look at other artists. Honestly, all the working comic artists that I've ever known do this. And I feel like not enough of them actually say that they do this, because nobody wants to admit that, you know, hey, I learned how to draw a chest from this artist. You know, everybody wants to say, oh, well, it's all from life. It really is not. Comics are, there's just so much history to draw upon. So, you know, I think Ivan Rice draws a really great torso, and so, you know, give it a try and look at the way he's drawing it and kind of index it in your mind, that with what you've learned from your anatomy books, which is why it's so important to learn those first. And then you can look at the choices that he's made and understand where he's kind of breaking the rules, and decide whether you want to break the rules that way yourself or if you don't. But it gives you an informed understanding of the choices that artists are making. And that's the next step really in improving, is making choices, you know, and that actually will result in you naturally developing a style too, assuming that you don't just look at one artist, which I really don't recommend that you do. You really want to look at, you know, a bit of a range of artists. Figure out, you know, who your top 5 artists are that you really like, and maybe find a few that are a little different, and look at the way that they all do things, and take the things that you like the most. And my whole style, everything that I do, is entirely taken from my favorite artists. There's nothing that I've come up with that I've just, you know, innovated out of thin air. I don't know, maybe there is, you know, I don't think so. I could pretty much point to everything and say, okay, you know what, I got this from this artist. This is like an Adam Kubert thing. This is a Mark Silvestri thing, or Simon Bisley, or Mike Mignola is a big one for me. I love Mike Mignola because you can take so much from him. This sounds terrible. I feel like I shouldn't be admitting this, but it's the truth. This is how, you know, this is how we all learn. And really, there's a pretty respectable history to it too. I mean, all of the old masters would learn by doing studies of other older masters. they wouldn't just study from life, because it would be like reinventing the wheel every time somebody had to learn how to draw, and it just doesn't make sense. And why would you put yourself through that? So take advantage of the great work that's been done before.
JSG, Phil, and Slemo is a musician who really likes to talk about it's okay to rip off your favorite bands, but not rip off your favorite 20 bands, not your favorite 2, and then you have your own sound in that.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, that's Pantera. Is that right? That's Pantera, which is great.
You like that ZHC copies your art?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, my art is totally a copy of Mark Silvestri and a few other artists, and I mean, this is how I learned, and really, Mark taught me, you know? And ZHC having influences, I feel like he's gotten some flack for that, and I think it's a shame. I don't think he deserves it at all. First of all, he is an incredible guy. He's so entertaining to watch. I think the reason he's so successful is he draws a really nice picture, but also he's just a blast to watch. People just love him. So, you know, yeah, no, I think it's perfectly okay with me.
People have been asking about who they can contact.
Comicsketchart.com for commissions. I should put that link up on the YouTube channel too. But yes, for commissions, my commission list actually is not open right now, but it will be very, very soon, like within 2 weeks at most, actually. So we had conventions, obviously, you know, that were canceled, and so I had commissions that were lined up for those conventions. We took pre-show commissions, and so I've had to get through those just at home. It can be a little bit more difficult for me to get these done at home because I've got, you know, conflicting things that I need to be working on. So I'm a little behind where I'd wanted to be, but I'll be taking on new commissions in 2 weeks at most.
There's a little bit of a debate about George Bridges.
Yes.
Talk about George Island drawings.
Right, and what's the debate?
Just using like block and like for underdrawing.
Okay, you know what? I would say I love Bridgman. I'm a huge fan. I have to admit, when I learned from Bridgman, I never read a word of it. I just looked at the pictures. You know, the words meant nothing to me, truthfully. So, and I also knew that Bridgman, as great as he was never trying to teach anatomy in the sense that, you know, this is exactly where all these muscles go, and it wasn't like an anatomy book. So I treated it a little differently, and it wasn't the only thing that I used. I just really loved how he was able to get so much strength and rhythm and harmony and out of his figures, and I love the way that he would show how he could block forms together. I thought that stuff was really great. When it comes to, the truth is, I think just like how some perspective tutorial things can get really needlessly complex, a lot of art instruction I think gets needlessly complex too. It's really not such a difficult thing. I mean, there's a real process to learning how to do this stuff. It's something that, you know, well, it's not really universal skill, so I understand why they don't teach it in school, but I think it's a bit of, for me, people get a little artisty about it, you know, and want to make it seem more complex than it is. It really is not so incredibly complex. You have to learn where all the muscles go and how they fit together. That really is, it's the foundational things are the most important. And once you have those foundational things, they don't have to look great. They just need to be there. And then you can build on that. And it's like learning how to write. First you learn what your letters are and how to write them. And as you go along, they start to look nicer and more fluid, and you get more comfortable. Now, another thing about writing is that as people get older, the writing starts to become, well, not everyone, but it starts to get more and more stylized and difficult to read, and you lose your shapes. And that can actually happen with art too. It's something I've always tried to be really aware of, is it's easy to forget things. And so I was talking to Robert Marzullo, who is, I don't know if he's still here, but we were talking about forearms, and we were talking about a connection of a muscle in the forearm, and I realized I could not remember how it connected, and I was connecting it wrong, and we were kind of going over it. And this is the kind of like you need to constantly be studying, because you learn new things, but you also forget things that you've already learned.
Sketchbag wants to know, how do you really get yourself out there to see your mom? You know, these days we've gotten away from sending messages, or I've never.
Yeah, well, they used to when I got in. Now, I didn't get into DC or Marvel. I don't know. I tried, and I got a huge pile of rejection letters. But I don't think you can even submit now. But the reason you can't submit is with the internet now, it's so much easier to get your work seen. Just open a DeviantArt page. You can post your stuff up online. There are forums. There are places where people will go to search for artists. I think it's actually very, very difficult. I'm not going to say impossible. There's certainly nothing's impossible, but it's not an easy thing to just jump in and start working for Marvel or DC.
Start create your own comics. Really.
Yeah, Meredith, my wife, said create her own comics, and you know what? She's done a few, and when she does them, we end up actually going through. She asks for submissions on Facebook, and we get a ton of stuff, and there's some beautiful stuff that, you know, unfortunately is not right for the project, but you know, it's right for something else. And so yeah, looking for opportunities like that on Facebook is really probably the best way. And once you, like, I know she worked on a book with she's actually worked on a couple of projects with artists that have gone on to do Marvel and DC work. She did a book called Rose, and that artist Iguara is working for Marvel now. He was working for Marvel before.
And Robert Mazzullo was still on.
Oh, good. All right. Robert Mazzullo is still on. I'm glad. Dude Power. I have original characters. I did my own original characters at Top Cow years and years and years ago. I did a character called Aphrodite 9, and I did a book called Ascension. Actually, I think you can sort of see the poster from it behind me. It's from 1997. It's a long time ago. And then I started working for Marvel. I really wanted to work on the characters, you know, Wolverine especially. Was my favorite Marvel character, still my favorite Marvel character. And I thought, you know what, there'll be a lot of time I can go back and I can just, you know, pick up where I left off. And the problem is that, you know, I started working with Brian Bendis, who's phenomenal, and he wanted to work. We were doing Ultimate X-Men, and then he wanted to do Avengers, and I said sure, you know. And then from there, I ended up doing a book. Well, I did Moonknight, which, you know, I love Moonknight, so I'm a huge Stephen Platt fan. That's the Moonknight that I really like, and that's what I wanted to do. So.
Have you ever met Stephen Platt? Somebody asked that earlier.
Yes, I have met Stephen Platt. He's great. Yeah, he mostly does film work now. He does comic work here and there. I wish he would do more. Yeah, he's a big influence for me. Absolutely. I think he's great. I really, you know, I understand why some people have a problem with artists that are a little bit more stylized and you know, really go far away from, you know, naturalistic anatomy and that kind of thing, especially when it's not like an indie style. People seem to be a little bit more forgiving, but somebody like Stephen Platt, they can be a little bit they find it off-putting, some people, you know. But I personally love that stuff. Like, I love Rob Liefeld's work. I just think it's got so much energy. Like the stuff he did on New Mutants years and years ago, and it's just, you know, it was just fun. He was having fun, and you know, I think this is it's an entertainment medium. I don't consider myself to be an artist. I consider myself to be, I don't know, I mean, entertainer is not really right, but I'm a comic book artist. I never wanted to be an artist. As a matter of fact, I never got into drawing really until I was 20, because all the experience I had with drawing or art was stuff that I thought was mind-numbing. I couldn't stand it. So I could go on.
All right, so here's a couple questions. What were your comics? not that you worked on, but that you read or had in your collection? And second of all, do you have a comic book collection now?
I have a massive comic book collection. I've got shelves. Well, you can see some of them behind me here. I've got a ton of stuff, and I get more all the time. And the first comics that I got were I borrowed comics from my sister. She had Excalibur by Alan Davis, who I'm still a huge fan of, and some other things. So I was reading those, and then when I went to the comic store the very first time, I got the first issue of Wolverine by John Buscema. It was actually a little bit older. Mark Silvestri was already finished with his run, and that was quite a bit later. And I got Jim Lee's X-Men #1, and then the Image stuff had come out. I'd never even heard of Image. I had no idea, but I saw it on the shelf. I thought it looked great, so I got Wildcats, and Mark Silvestri's book wasn't quite out yet, Cyberforce. I was still waiting for that one. I got Spawn, all the early Image stuff, and it was the Image artists that got me into comics and made me want to draw. And finding Image was, and it was like my dream to work for Image. I thought that would be amazing. I thought there's no way that would ever work out, and I didn't realize that at the time. Image, they were really looking for people. I'm gonna give it a cast shadow right there, and they were willing to train. Which, I mean, such a hard thing to find now. I'm going to cast a shadow here too.
So, what is like drawing the lead?
Boardroom scenes, crowds, people eating breakfast. All the boring stuff. I get really sick of people just talking back and forth over and over, and I have to say I'm probably not the very best at it. And I try as much as I can to make it interesting for myself by changing angles and trying to make it a little more dramatic, but I'm not an expressionist.
Then how do you stay motivated after you've been drawing? Art's the other one.
I don't stay motivated. I am unmotivated all the time. All the time I'd rather be playing video games or doing something else. I mean, it happens a lot. As much as I love this, I love doing it. It's relaxing for me. It's my favorite thing to do. But like anything that you do all the time, you're not always going to want to do it. And when it's a job, it needs to get done. And so my way of being motivated, I don't worry about being motivated. I worry about having work that needs to get done. And I just have the discipline to do it. And that is really the only way with anything, like working out, which I have not been the best at lately. I'm working on it again, but it's just not relying on motivation. It's relying on your determination to do the work.
Totally off the topic of comic books and artwork, but what are your favorite movies? Drake's World or Drake's Word?
Drake's Word. My favorite movies. A lot of horror movies really are my favorite. I was talking to a few artists. Actually, it was the last convention I was at. I was talking to Kyle Higgins and Mark Silvestri were there, and we were talking about movies, and I said my favorite movie is Alien Covenant, and they were laughing at me because it's a terrible movie. I don't care. I love that movie. I thought it was great. And, there was so much that I had so many questions, and I thought they all had these amazing answers, and I was dying to see the next movie for them to play it all out. And then the next movie came along and the answers were all garbage, but I still love that movie.
What about video games?
My favorite video game ever actually came out this year. It's Meredith, what's the name of my game that I always play? Days Gone.
Oh, I was gonna say you're asking the wrong person.
Days Gone. You right? I've got a.
I was gonna say it's the motorcycle game.
It's the motorcycle game. Yeah, it's motorcycles and zombies. I love zombie games. I love zombies, and I love motorcycles. So it's great. It's like an open world game. You ride around on your motorcycle, and then there are these huge hordes of zombies that will converge, and you have to fight them all at once. It's an absolute blast.
So here's a question: how many times did you start a picture halfway? And then stop and completely abandon it and start another. How often does that happen? You've been working in comics for a long time.
It happens. It definitely happens. Not very often. It happens with covers. Sometimes I just get a little bit in my head and I'm not liking it, and there are times I've done that, and then I go back maybe a year later and it's sitting in a drawer. Okay, so I've got the shadow basically worked in here. Hopefully it's losing some of the picture here, but I've got the shadow worked in. I'm gonna go ahead now. I'm gonna take my zebra. This is a zebra pen, and I'm gonna start working in finer details in my rendering. I can't get a really fine tip with this, so from there I'll go back to this pen to finish. But
Robert Marzullo wants to know how you work on your speed.
Well, to be honest, I think that it's more important to work on quality and not even worry about speed if you don't have a deadline. The best way to work on speed, though, really is for your editor to say, you know, we need 8 pages in 2 days, you know, and it just has to get done. And so you just do it, and the work sucks and it suffers, but you get much faster. And that, I mean, that's certainly how I did it. Is I just hit times where, I mean, generally I've been pretty lucky. Editors have been very good to me. The times when I've really had to rush, it's because I just have not been working. As much as I say, you know, I work when I'm not motivated, there are times I don't work, and then I end up paying for it, and I just have to crank out a bunch of work all at once. And you'd be amazed at how you know, you do it enough, you draw enough pages, and you can just rely on what you know and just start going, and you just can't question too much. You just go with it, and your first, and this is why, you know, the work can be really good, and it's maybe sometimes some of the best work that you do, and then it can also be trash because you really don't have time to rethink things and fix it when it's bad. You just keep moving. The other thing that I think really helped me be faster when I needed to be is I would actually lay out my entire page just with pencil, and like the way that I did this before shadow, but with a pencil. And then I would maybe lay out 3 or 4 pages that way, and then I would give myself like 3 hours to do that, which is fast. And then I would give myself 3 hours per page to render them, put all the shadows in and the detail. And I would put all the shadow, the way that I did this, I'd put all the shadows in first. That way, if I have to walk away from it, at least it's finished somewhat and I could turn it in. And then I would put in as much finer detail as I could get away with until my 3 hours were up and I just had to move on.
Dave, just open your candle, your camera a little bit for the rendering.
Sure.
I don't think it's clear.
All right.
The fine detail. People are very excited about it. Next question. What's the one tip you wish someone started?
Okay, I'm going to say the tip that I would have liked the most, that would have been the most helpful for me. I don't know that it's actually going to be... I'll say a couple of tips, but really the one that I could have used the most is to just understand that it will get hard and to not quit. Because I really wanted to quit. I felt like it really wasn't working. I was really, really struggling. There were people that did quit, and yeah, I came close. So I would say, you know, somebody to just say, look, it gets easier. You know, the more you do this, you'll find your way. You have to keep working at it and keep trying to improve and put all of your energy into making the work as good as possible and not worry. And I did this quite a bit. I would worry, this artist is doing this project, I'm not doing that project, why didn't I get that project? And you can spend so much mental energy on that kind of thing, and none of that, it is actually very counterproductive to growing. So you just put all of your mental energy and focus into being as good as you can and growing, and then the rest sorts itself out.
So aside from your wife, who's the best comic book writer you've ever worked with? I mean, I put that caveat in myself, because clearly I was the best, but aside from me.
Right. So aside from my wife, I'm assuming you guys can't hear her in the background, but she said yes. So aside from your wife, who's your favorite writer that you've worked with? I loved working with Bendis. His characters just seem very alive to me. Like the dialogue just made them very real, and that actually really helped me draw them a lot. I really enjoyed working with Jeff Loeb. He was crazy, you know, he would just do anything. He was totally fearless, and so it was fun. I mean, there were a few things that we did where I look back on it and I think, whoa, I don't know if I would make that decision again, you know, but we just went with it, and it was controversial, but it was fun. We did Ultimatum together, and Jeff Johns just had such a great sense of how to play characters off against each other and make them work together. He was great, and he's just a great guy. I really liked working with him a lot. I really enjoyed working with Tom King. I've got such a long list, you know. It would be easier for me to give you a list of the artists I didn't, or the writers I didn't like to work with, but I'm not gonna do that. But that's a pretty short list.
Oh, they can hear. Jason Bascom says.
Okay.
It's no biggie. Of course, no biggie. I'm reading the questions, Jason. Who draws the best Batmobile?
Sean Murphy. Sean Gordon Murphy. No contest.
Let's talk artist block and dynamic pose.
Okay.
Other than just going back and standing.
Right.
Do you ever have artist block? First of all?
Well, yes and no. I have artist block, of course. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to say yes, I really do. There are times I get too worked up, or I haven't slept enough, or whatever, and for whatever reason, I just cannot seem to get my head around a picture, and I just can't do it. So it happens, and I work through it. I mean, the only way to work through any kind of a block like that is to understand that it's really just a desire to not work, you know, or a fear. Actually, probably more accurately, a fear. It's a fear of failing. So you just have to overcome it. I've got a lot of cleanup to do here. It's a mess. But and for dynamic poses other than just standing there, well, the best advice that I could give is to I mean, yes, absolutely, look at life, you know. If you want to draw a couple of old men playing chess in the park, well, the best way to learn to do that is to, you know, find an image online, and don't just copy it, because you won't really learn that much from it, and it can look a little static, anything copied from photos. But do gesture drawings from it and get a feel of it and put yourself in their shoes. It's something I think is so important, but it's a difficult thing to get across. So much of when you're drawing a character, you want to feel that character. And, you know, I think I really love the darker, kind of angrier characters, because it's like a visceral feel that I can get from drawing it, like, you know, and that appeals to me more than drawing people playing chess, you know. But it all works the same way. You have to draw it, sketch from it, and feel what it's about. And that really, to me, is the point of gesture drawing. And that is how you get more dynamic figures. There's really no other way. There's certainly no other way that I'm aware of, or anyone I've ever talked to.
Canadian question. Favorite hockey team?
Toronto Maple Leafs. I have no choice. All my friends like Toronto Maple Leafs. If I say anything different, I can't leave the house.
Fair enough. Do your hands ever get sore, or just from all the hours you spent drawing, or you're just like your body's so used to it?
Yes, my hands get sore. Absolutely. When I pencil more, I don't actually press as hard when I'm inking, so I don't get as sore. But when I'm just penciling, like, I don't. We're back. Lost my camera. I normally have tape around my pencil just to give it a little bit of cushion on my hand, and it's helpful. But I'm not really actually penciling that much anymore. I just don't do tight pencils very often at all. I'm a little rusty even with it. Like, I need to do it more.
use regular, like you talk about your whiteout pens, is that just regular whiteout or is it special for
I don't know what it is. So this is it here. Posca, Uni Posca. I got this from Marks of Vestry. I was using, I don't have it here. Oh wait, I do. I was using these ones, and this is a Uniball Signo. This one's empty, actually, it looks like, but I was using these, and they actually go on a little easier. It's more of a pen base, it's got a ball, but anything will take them up. So if I try to use this pen on it or my smaller pens, it just comes right up and it makes it difficult. Whereas the Poscas, they're more of a paint pen. And so when I use them, I can just go on them with anything. And I find I can layer it. So if the first layer doesn't really cover it, I can go over it again. Whereas these ones here, they actually bring themselves up too. So it can be difficult to get a really good white out of it. So that's all it. They work very well. Probably the best way to do it would be to use proper whiteout in a jar. You dilute it down with a little bit of water, and it's a process, and I don't have the patience.
Let me ask about a zipatone. I don't know what that is, but you probably do.
A zipatone is it's a tone. It's a clear acetate that's sticky, and you put it right on the page. You cut it with like an X-Acto blade, and it gives you like a pattern, like a dot pattern, that kind of thing. Something that was very common years ago and not common at all now. As a matter of fact, I think there are Japanese companies that sell them, but I don't think there's any company here. I know artists that have made zipatones on the computer, like Photoshop, that kind of thing, and then actually had to print them out to use them. I've never used a zipatone. I'm not against them. I think they can look really cool. My favorite thing about a zipatone really is just kind of the retro look that you get from it. Generally speaking, I like things to look a little more organic, and it's not the most organic look, but it just has so much history to it that they're pretty cool. One of these days I should do it. You know what? The main thing that stops me from using a zipatone? I don't have any. Really.
Okay, so how do you filter the scripts that you use to draw the pages, and how do you determine how many panels on the page?
How many panels? Okay, well, I determine if I have a full script, it says, 6 panels on the page, and it will describe what the panels are. That actually makes things very, very easy. And unless the writer really makes a mistake, or I think things aren't going to be clear, I don't deviate from that. I tend to restrict my work much more to what's inside the panels, and I keep the storytelling, like the pacing beats, according to the script. Writers, often even writers that don't have the best pacing, get very upset when you don't. So it can be a good reason to work with a good writer. But if I don't have a full script and it doesn't have everything fully explained, then what I do is I look at a scene, and let's say you've got a couple of guards and they're standing in a room, and then they hear a sound and turn toward it, and then you see the Hulk burst through the wall at them as they fly backwards, and rocks and things hit them. Well, I would call that a page. I wouldn't move, like, I think that would be a good place to break the page. And the way that I would do that page is I would say, okay, first of all, what's my most important panel? And I think that it's pretty clear that, Hulk bursting through the wall is the most important panel. So I'd make that one huge. And then the other panels, I would say, okay, the first panel, it's them standing in a room. I would need to know what kind of room that is, and I would want to establish the scene. So you see, let's say it's like a guard room. You see their guard screens and their chairs, and maybe one of them drinking coffee, that kind of thing. I want to make sure to get that all across. So I do a broader shot where they're smaller in the panel, and then I would zoom into a medium to close shot when you see them reacting to the sound as they turn their heads, and then I would show the big shot from behind them as Hulk bursts through the wall. And what's very, very important is I would not have the Hulk bursting through a wall that you haven't seen before. You want to make sure that it's a lot like somebody mentioned hockey, and I think when you watch hockey, you only ever see the game, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but you only ever see the game from one side of the rink. They never switch to a camera on the other side of the rink, ever. And the reason they don't is because if they did, it would actually look like the teams have swapped sides through it. Just randomly in the game. All of a sudden, you know, the Detroit Red Wings would be coming from the left instead of the right. It would just make it a mess. And it's the same thing with storytelling. You need to pick a side and then stay on that side. And there's a lot of range from low angles to high angles to all the way behind a character to directly facing onto the scene. I will cover this in a video coming up for sure, but it's actually a fairly simple concept to get this stuff organized and to make sure you don't break the major rules. Once you get past breaking major rules, things can get a little more interesting and maybe a little more difficult, and there's so many different techniques. But if you understand the major rules and how to not break them, like for instance, you never ever want to have a character with their ankles cut off at the bottom of the page. It looks terrible. Or have a character with their arms stretched out and right at the elbow or right at the wrist, they're cut off the page, out of the panel. Things like that. If you know to not make those kinds of major errors, and I will cover all of the major errors I know, then you're really farther along than a lot of working artists.
So the last laugh wants advice. Feels like she feels like their inks look flat. So how do you add dimension? Secret to adding dimension to your ink on a page.
Okay, well, you start with your just your cartoon with no shadowing, and then here, there's only one way I can do this. I'll show you. So you start, here's your leg, for instance, and there's nothing but just a simple outline, and so it looks flat. But then if my light's coming from here, let's say, that doesn't even show up on the screen. It's not showing up here. From here, then the first thing that I would do is put in line weights. And I don't really do this enough, but I definitely have it in my head. And I would say, until you're comfortable, this is what you want to do. As the lines that are away from the light on the side that's away from the light are going to be thicker. And as they curve away from the light, they also get thicker. And then you want to make sure to accentuate any connection points. That's a connection point. That's a connection point. So I want to make sure that's accentuated. And then I can go thinner here. It's kind of curving up toward the light a little bit, and then thicker here. It's away from the light again. And here I've got another connection point. So I want to make sure that's very defined. I could even break up lines between them. I wouldn't do that on the side away from the light, but... And then here, I'm going to curve under, so that'll go a little thicker here. I'm going to curve under here, that'll go a little thicker. I've got a connection here, so I want to make sure that's clear. And then... And you can see, even before there's any rendering or anything, or any detail, just doing proper line weights. And this is traditionally an inking technique. It's rare that it's left to inkers nowadays. Pencilers are more careful about making sure that their drawings have this in there, generally, always, really. But that right there is a major, major step, and I would start with that. I have a lot more to say about that for sure, but if you don't have that working, none of the other stuff will work.
So here's a question for you. Have you ever tried to sharpen, shape your microns with mixed or one? Yes, this question.
Dick, have you ever tried that? I know it'll take a second for him to answer, yep. But I didn't know that that was a possibility. I've never heard of that. So no, I've never done it, but I didn't even know it could be done. And what would be the purpose? I'm very curious, because if there's a purpose to it, I'm going to give it a try. So my rendering along this form here, I'm going thicker, but very, very short, because I've got a really hard curve here, and I don't want to just put a long rendering line around it and soften it too much. I want my rendering to give it a bit of a beefier, kind of more thick feel, but I don't want to soften my forms when I do that.
Neil Wilson wants to know, when you make your organic lines for rocks, is there a tip you could give to help create the amount of life you get marks and patterns? You are a legend.
Well, thank you very much. The tip that I would give is, it took me a long time to get comfortable drawing rocks, like a very, very long time. And the way that I did it I've looked at life for drawing rocks, like photos, and actually that really works, but I found it did not work until I started looking at some artists that did it incredibly well. My recommendation is Olivier Vatine. If you're not familiar, he did a book called Aqua Blue. It's a French book. I don't know if it's translated. The one that I have is in French, so I can't read it, but I look at the pictures, you know. Anyway, he did it. In my mind, I think he did it better than anyone. Frank Rosetta did incredible rocks. And what I would do is just painstakingly, slowly, just try and copy those shapes. And so the flow and the quick, you know, throwing those lines and making them work, that wasn't happening for me for a long time. And then eventually I got comfortable with it and I started being able to just throw it. But I'm going to show you this too. So here's my rock. Also barely, and I can't move this paper. This is my drawing. I've got my desk is covered in paint and garbage, so I put this on to make it look a little neater. So I'm going to draw some cracks, and cracks are the same as this. You want to make sure your connection points are solid, and you can actually break everything else up quite a bit. And then you don't want to draw, you know, crack, crack, crack. You want it to be large and small shapes mixed together, and it takes a bit actually to get the hang of making sure that your shapes are varied. That won't just come naturally, so you have to kind of fight it at first. And then I'm going to say, now again, my lighting is coming from here. So maybe I'll make this kind of duck under, so I'll go thicker and create a shadow here. And then I'm going to shore up that connection here. I know I want it thicker here. And I'm going to go thicker toward the bottom of it too, because it's coming away from the light. And then I want to make sure not to go too thick toward the top. And I can just slowly start putting them together. I can actually create a little ridge just by not drawing all the way to that line and it's like leaving a little bit of negative space there. That can really work. It's a technique I like quite a bit. I use it all the time. And so that's really how it's done. I wish it was easier to explain. I remember Mark Silvestri trying to explain this to us when we were young artists. And I mean, the way he did it, it was incredible. It was beautiful. He explained it clearly. But we would walk away and our rocks would still be terrible, because you really do just have to work through it. It's a comfort thing. Hair can be the same. Anything that has an organic, non-defined shape, unless you have a real affinity for it, you have to study it just by repetition and getting comfortable. So if your rocks are not looking good, don't despair.
Got back to you. Said Series 2 just did it to my 08, actually kind of nice. Thin and thick lines, but maybe a little in. Being a lefty, how do you prevent yourself from smudging in drawings?
I use a 2H lead. That really helps. That makes a very big difference. If you use a really soft lead, you'll get a lot more smudging. And then I've learned over the years, I don't even think about it, but I tend to start my shadowing and rendering on the right and then move toward the left where my hand is, and that helps. And the other thing, really, the most simple thing and probably the easiest thing to recommend is just to put a piece of paper under your hand. You can even get an artist glove. It's like a glove that only covers 2 of your fingers. I've never used one. I've seen inkers use them. It gives them a bit of their hand can flow across the page better. So maybe I should try that. You know what? I'm never trying that.
No.
There's no way I'm going to spend half my day with a weird little glove on my hand. I don't care how well it works. Just because somebody could come in the room and go, "What do you have on your hand?" Yeah.
Let's talk favorite inker, favorite colorist. If you had like a dream team working on, if you were just doing pencils and you had a dream team, who would you want to ink you and who would you want?
I don't just have exactly completely just one person, you know, because there are so many great inkers and colorists. So I don't want to just say, oh, this person, and then, you know, other colorists and inkers that I work with say, oh, well, I'm done with this guy. So I would say some of my favorites, and I would consider myself equally blessed to work with any of them on a project, would be Danny Mickey, who I've worked with for years and years, is absolutely incredible. Richard Friend. Richard actually has a YouTube channel that is great. He covers a lot of different artists and talks about, like, he breaks down their style. I think it's a great channel. Scott Williams, Jimmy Reyes, who has a channel, is an incredible inker, and he just has a natural feel over my work that I really, really like. Matt Banning, Bat, is generally how he signs his work. I think he uses almost all quill, and he gets such a crisp, hard, chiseled line. And he actually, I really like harder shapes rather than softer shapes on everything, and he takes that even further. And I think a large part of the reason I like such hard shapes is actually I worked with him years ago at Top Cow, and I tend to learn a lot from inkers that I work with. So yeah, I've got a list of inkers that I think are incredible. Sandra Hope, I think, is amazing. I love working with Sandra Hope. And as far as colorists go, Frank D'Armata, he colors all my stuff at Marvel. Anything from Marvel. Right now I'm just doing covers, but if I do something at Marvel, it will be colored by Frank. Absolutely. I think he's great. And my favorite thing about him is I never know what he's going to do. I can't predict what his colors are going to look like. He has such a broad palette, but he also has such a cinematic palette. He knows how to gray things out toward the shadows and then really bring out and punch the color where you want to draw your eye. It's just a really sensitive touch. I love Tombow at DC. He's incredible. He colors most of my DC stuff when I can get him. He's very busy. Steve Furcow, he's colored some stuff for me at DC lately, and I'm thrilled whenever I can get him to color something. He actually is a video game artist, and so every once in a while he enjoys coloring comics still, and he'll do it, you know, but he doesn't have a lot of time, so it can be hard to get him to do something. But yeah, those are my top people.
So just reading a couple comments. Michael Johnston Curry, ages ago in Dallas, you drew a small example of how to add texture to backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to throw it away, and I asked you to sign it to me. I still have it, and it helped me so much.
Oh, that's great. What was his name?
Michael Johnston.
Michael Johnston Curry. Well, thank you very much. That's really great to hear. I'm so glad that you kept it. Thank you.
And then Jake Carlson, hey David, thanks so much for all of these videos. Your video on gesture drawing was really helpful for me. I focused so much on layouts and composition recently, and your advice helped me.
Well, thank you. I am so glad the composition video helped. I don't feel like it was probably the coolest visual video to watch, but I do feel like it's such an important video. And there's so many ways to approach gesture drawing, and I certainly don't think that mine is you know, necessarily superior to others, but focusing on it and understanding how much it can affect your final drawing is great. I'm glad that you're getting something out of that.
Wants to know if you make a video playing video. Probably not.
I will never make a video playing video games because I am the worst video game player ever. I die over and over and over. Yeah.
Do you ever color your own work?
I have colored my own work. I did a couple of covers that way. I did Justice League of America #1. I colored that one. I don't think it was probably. I would have been better to work with a proper colorist. You know, I get experimental at times. I just get bored and I want to try different things. So yes, I have colored. I prefer painting over computer coloring.
I'll answer this question. Does American chocolate really taste like rotten eggs? It tastes like wax.
So Meredith just answered a question about American chocolate, and apparently it tastes like wax compared to Canadian chocolate.
It has a high wax content.
It has a high wax
really
content.
Tastes like chocolate at all. Sorry.
Well, whatever. I like American chocolate. I'll take any kind of chocolate I can get. I don't care. Not picky. So I want to say what I'm doing right now is just with, I'm going to do another one here. I'm going to create a ridge. I know I've got my light coming from this way downward. And so I'm going to create a ridge. I'm just going to draw a thin line. I can't get that thick with this pen. Where it, because this portion is higher than this portion, I know that where it's away from the light, it's going to be thicker. So I'll go thicker there and thicker here. And then I can render up into it. Let me get there. I want to be consistent, and then I'm going to just really short strokes render out of it, and then I can add a little more rendering above it. I should probably be using a thinner pen for this. And that ridge that I gave it, that gap, gives it, it feels like there's a raised piece there, and I love that effect.
Have you ever used SketchUp models or DAZ 3D objects or figures?
I have used SketchUp and DAZ 3D. I actually went through a bit of a period where I was using a lot of that. I thought it was really gonna make a difference in my work, and it made everything very, very stiff. And it was like a bad period for me. This is the downside of experimenting. You know, I want to try something, and I think I decide, oh, this is the way to do it, and it's gonna work, and then I don't let it go, and it's not working. And it actually took me probably 6 months of just working traditionally again. I didn't do it that long. I did it for a few months to break it and to get comfortable just drawing properly again. I would highly not recommend it. Where I would say it's useful, and it can be a bit of a time saver, you know, if you choose to try it. Especially is, let's say you've got a panel where you're looking down on a scene of a ton of people, and you know they're on different levels. And you know, trying to map that out with perspective and do it accurately with, you know, meeting a schedule, it can be a little difficult. And just throwing that together in 3D and then doing a quick, you know, just a quick gesture trace, so you don't actually get the figures. Don't copy the figures because they will look stiff, but if you just copy the placement, it's a trick to kind of get some of those sorts of scenes worked out. And I will do that from time to time, just out of laziness.
And here's something you can relate from old school fact. When first starting out, Frank Miller used to push so hard that he would dent the page. Klaus Janson said jokingly, poured ink on.
So Frank Miller used to press really hard. Well, he's an intense guy. He's, you know, he's the nicest guy though. If you meet him, he's so nice. But, you know, clearly a very intense guy. Yeah.
I don't know anybody who does that.
Yeah, I could definitely relate with pressing too hard, and I can't help it. I break my lead constantly, and I actually use these pencils as opposed to a clickable pencil because the lead is thicker, so it's less likely to break. The clickable ones I break so fast they're almost useless for me.
And we have from Marcelo Braga. Hi David, salute from Brazil. I'm an artist myself and find your stuff.
Hi Marcelo.
One of the best there are today. Very tasteful, neat.
Well, thank you very much, Marcello.
Like watching or even follow mainstream Marvel stuff? Like the Marvel.
Yeah, of course. I'm a huge fan of the movies. I've watched all of the movies when they come out. I think it's, I mean, we're very privileged right now to be in a time when they're being made. For so many years when I was, you know, starting in comics, we used to talk about how great it would be, like if they could pull some things off on the screen, and you know, nobody really had done it at the time. I remember when X-Men came out around 2000, and it was a massive thrill because it was the first like team superhero movie that actually really worked, and they stayed away from costumes for the most part. They went with leather, and I thought that was kind of a shame, but it looked good, you know. And it's only gotten better since then. Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
the most time consuming? Trying to make your buildings look so good. I use reference and boring. Just feel boring.
Backgrounds, depending, absolutely can be the most time consuming, yes. And I enjoy drawing buildings and I enjoy drawing backgrounds, but even if you don't, the difference that they make for a comic page, for immersing somebody in a world, it's worth it. I think when you just have floating figures, let's say you do an establishing scene and you can see some buildings and then every other panel is just floating heads, it doesn't immerse people in the story as much as I think it could. So I'd like more complete backgrounds. As far as making your buildings look more exciting and interesting on the page, it comes down to composition and black placement and understanding, you know, when a building is far in the background, you want to make sure that your lines are very light and airy, and when something's closer, you want to, you know, really build that up. And anything that you draw, something in the foreground is going to be thicker and something in the background is going to recede and be thinner. And then also it's layering your blacks, and I will definitely do a video on that coming up, on how to layer your shapes and your black shapes in a pleasing rhythmic way that makes it look like a composed shot as opposed to just something that is photographic. Another thing that is very important, and I will cover this too, is using negative space in your drawing and using shadowing and line weight in order to create dimension, as opposed to just drawing you know, flat, rigid, ruled lines.
Who's the artist you said that did rocks again?
Olivier Vatine.
Spell that.
Hold on. Yeah, I know right where this book is. Okay, so this is Olivier Vatine. This is Aqua Blue.
We're not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it because people have other questions.
Yeah, well, you know what?
I don't know how to spell Olivier Vatine.
You guys have to see this. I'm gonna go to my favorite issue. Look at this stuff. And there's a great page with rocks. Right there. You could build a career on that. It's incredible. And I have copied this stuff so many times. So there you go. Olivier Vatine. And it's Vatine.
Had a few people who had to go because but what, let's talk about, oh no, I have two questions for you. First of all, if you could be a superhero, who would you be?
Oh, it's a serious question.
Yes.
If I could be a superhero, who would I be? I'm too lazy to be a superhero.
That's true. And then my second question is, can you discuss your journey? Like, what really made you make the transition from just strictly being a penciler to doing a lot more of your own ink?
I can be very unfair and critical with inkers, and it is such a difficult job, especially not only when you're inking are you you have to do a job that pleases you and that you can be proud of, but you're also beholden to the penciler's whim, and it's incredibly difficult. And I try to be sensitive to that, but I know I can also be difficult. And I really have specific things that I'm looking for, and it can be difficult to find that. And then sometimes the inkers that I really like will be busy on another project, and I can't work with them. And yeah, inking my own work just gives me more control.
I think you do more stained glass.
Yeah, I'd like to do more stained glass. The one thing I would say about it though, it's a massive time commitment to do. It's the drawing is just stage one. That's just designing the picture, and then planning out how it's going to break apart and all the pieces are going to go together, planning out the colors, what kind of glass you're going to use for different pieces to get the color. Now, I didn't have to make those decisions. Fortunately, I had somebody help with that. I didn't have to make the glass decisions. I had to make the color decisions. And then you actually have to paint your outline on top of the glass. It's inking on the glass, and you're not inking, you're inking with a heavy lead paint, so you don't get the kind of control that you get on paper whatsoever. And then you fire it in a kiln, and it comes out, and then you start to tone it. You do a layer of tone. You know, I was so happy with it. It looked great. You put it in the kiln and it almost disappears, and you put another layer on it, another layer, and every little piece, there are thousands of pieces. It's a huge job. Low precision art.
Oh, video game design. Have you ever done any video game design?
Yes, I've designed video games a little bit, not much. I did a game called Demonic around 2005 that ultimately never came out. It was canceled, but it did actually appear, like a pre-build appeared in an Adam Sandler movie.
Really?
Yep.
Learn something new every day.
And I did some designs for a Ghostbuster game. I did some X-Men designs for an X-Men game. I was working on X-Men at Marvel, and so I did some designs for that. That didn't go that well. It's totally my fault. I was so overwhelmed. I could not find the time to do the work, and it's such an iterative process. Drawing a comic, I just start drawing, you know, whereas working on a video game design, you do a bunch of sketches, and then you go from the sketches to more finished drawings, and it's everything that you do goes through a critique process, and it can be heartbreaking. I much prefer working in comics. But that said, video games are, you know, it's a great place to work. I highly recommend it. I'm spoiled by comics. You just get so much freedom.
What about kneaded erasers? Do you find they leave less smudges? How do you use it?
Well, kneaded eraser, the advantage of it is that it doesn't fully erase the pencils, so I can still kind of see a shadow of what was there, and it means that I can use that as a guide. So I use these ones too. I use just like a white eraser also. So a lot of times with inks, I like using a kneaded eraser because it erases the pencils just a little bit less.
Hey, where's all your stuff posted? All your tools?
Below my videos, the last 2 videos, I've got in the description. All the tools that I use are posted.
What do you think is harder to draw, men or male or female characters?
Well, it depends on where your strengths are. For me, female characters are more difficult to draw. They're faster to draw, but they're more difficult.
And Mike Stewart wants to know if you can tell lines.
Well, the line of beauty is just it's a curved line that has a broader curve going into an opposing smaller curve. And it's something you see all over the place. It just has a nice rhythm to it. It's much more interesting than just a flat curve. And so, you know, it's something like with hair, I'd never just draw a curve. I always draw a line of beauty line. and you know, with anatomy, with female figures especially, but male figures too. Like really, it's something that I use everywhere. Like if I was to draw some wires coming out of a machine, I would not just draw curves. I'd draw more of a line of beauty type of a line. It's a simple thing, really. I mean, it's not a, you know, it's not a complex concept, really. It's very simple, but it's very effective.
So, let's say comics died. What would you do instead of comics? If you drawing no longer was an option for you, what would you do?
If I couldn't draw
Anymore.
Well, I would say I would paint. If I couldn't do art?
Yeah, let's think about if you can do art.
I really don't know. I don't know what I would do.
Do you know the art of Kevin O'Neill?
Yes. Yeah, Kevin O'Neill is a 2080 artist, especially, I mean, largely known for. Like Dr. Judge Dredd, that kind of thing. Am I wrong? I think that's right.
Don't ask me. Somebody on the stream knows that.
Okay. I might be wrong. So I'm going to keep going along with this pen for a little bit longer. Just get my rocks more thoroughly put in. The figure's basically done with this pen, and then once this is finished, I'll go ahead and get back to my smaller pen, and we'll be able to finish up. It's actually a pretty lengthy process doing that too, so hopefully people are still watching.
Meredith's gonna go to bed. Like the pumpkin at 10 when the clock strikes 10.
Yeah, Daniel, I'm definitely doing a video on cross hatching. That is coming up very, very soon.
So if you had to recommend,
Are these your questions now?
no, well, this one is, but it's based on other things I've read.
Oh, okay.
If you were going to recommend 3 comic books or 3 books for an aspiring comic artist that they had to have in their library, what would they be?
Just 3. Wow. Oh, it's tough. Let me think about it. You're narrowing it down so much.
I know. People don't have, people live, we all live on budgets these days. So, that's why I ask. Narrow down to 3. In the meantime, while you're thinking about your top 3 comic book recommendations for new artists.
Okay, number 1 is going to be Sword of Azrael by Joe Quesada and Kevin Nolan. And I would say Mark Silvestri's Wolverine run. It's a good long run. It's phenomenal work. It was huge for me.
Jake has your answers. How to draw comics and Marvel Wayne.
Okay, well, I thought we were talking about comics. You know?
I know. I said for aspiring comic artists, but comics too. It's all good.
Well, okay, thank you, Jake. And that is true. Absolutely. You're probably better off with proper instructional books than just comics. I have learned so much from comics, but you can only learn from other artists if you've already put the work into learning the foundational stuff from instructional things.
Are you gonna do videos on like layouts and stuff?
I am going to do videos on panel layouts and that kind of thing. It's a little tough because they're more involved. I don't know that I can do a 10-minute video on panel layouts. So I'm really losing my camera quite a bit.
Think you'd ever do a painting video?
I don't know if I would ever, I'll say this. If I ever did a painting video, it would be your opportunity to watch me struggle. Because I am...
Nobody's got that much time.
Yeah, it really is. I like acrylic because I can just keep layering and layering. I could never paint with watercolor because if you can't figure out your tones and your colors right away, you're sunk. And I would be sunk. So I love painting. I don't do it enough to be competent. So there are times I like how it turns out, but it's just such a back and forth process. I would be the worst person to look at for how to paint.
Thanks to the people who are still watching you.
Yes, thank you. Actually, yeah, and for everyone that's been watching from the beginning, thank you very, very much. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm certainly enjoying spending time with you and drawing. This has been great so far. It's a little tough. I wish I could draw and look up at the comments at the same time. And Alex, if you gotta go, thank you for staying as long as you did. I really appreciate it. Thank you in F82 second. And thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it.
Do you miss being in the studio with other artists, like when you were in Top House?
I do and I don't. I'm a bit of a loner. I miss it all the time. I couldn't do it every day. But yes, I really do miss it. And just the innovation that comes from so many artists together. One person comes up with something cool and everybody else kind of picks it up and everybody competes with each other. It makes you better so much faster. And also, if you have a good group of artists that you're working with that are supportive, they can really help you understand the things you're doing wrong without just crushing you and making you want to stop.
Create your own stuff. Are you working on any create your own stuff right now? Are you thinking about doing it in the future? I had a few questions about that.
I am working on create your own things right now, yes. Here, I'm gonna move it. Well, you know what? I'm not gonna mess with the camera. Things could go really wrong. Let me take a look at my setting here. So I'm going to be going, this is my thinner pen and I want to be able to show it. So let me come in just a little bit further. All right. This has been a very unusual experience, I really did not expect to be on here answering the telephone. So thank you for that.
Well, I was trying to think of how I could unobtrusively assist you with your stream.
Yeah, that was
I'm sitting here
totally unobtrusive. Yeah, no one noticed that at all.
No, well, there's only so much you can do. Because I'm watching upstairs and I was like, I'm gonna miss all these questions. So.
Yeah, it was going by very quickly.
One Mighty R. I have to find one Mighty R's questions. He wants one back up. Easy way to do it. I don't know what it is. Ray Dillon's here. Hi, Ray.
Hi, Ray. Thank you for coming.
Say hi to Renee for us.
Ray Dillon is a colorist, letterer, writer, an incredible talent.
And worked with Meredith.
On The Light Princess from Cave Publishing.
Got to get my own property.
Yeah, absolutely.
One Mighty R, I don't see any questions, so I just likes you, Dave.
Thank you, One Mighty R.
Do you have any plans on doing an Art of Dave Finch book?
The closest thing I have to plans for that would be to do like a sketchbook, and I've done it before. It's been a long time. I really am kind of due. It's a little tougher. I had comic sketch art when I was doing sketches at conventions, taking scans right at the convention, and he was keeping a list, he was going to do a book, and I'm sure we still will, but obviously it's a little bit on hold right now. So,
Favorite Batman artist?
Simon Bisley and Greg Capullo.
Favorite Batman actor?
Ben Affleck. I don't care. I thought he was great.
Favorite Batman
Okay,
movie?
I thought he was great when he was into it. You know, my favorite Batman movie, the one with Bane.
Oh, Tom Harvey, is that?
Yeah. Do you feel in charge? Good.
Tell us how you got your start at Image and Top Cow. Like, how did you break into comics? That's always a great story.
Actually, you know what? Somebody asked earlier on, you know, how do you get in? It's so difficult to get noticed by Marvel and DC and that kind of thing. And I completely am totally remiss. Most people that I know that have gotten into comics got in through conventions, and that's how I got into Top Cow. I showed someone at the Top Cow booth my work. Actually, I had just shown Dan Fraga my work. This is in New York in '94. It was June, I think, of '94. May, early June. Anyway, and Dan Fraga was very, very supportive, which was great. I actually, showing my work at conventions, I had some people that were truly not supportive. I mean, pretty harsh, but you know, it toughens you up, I guess. And then I went right from there. I talked to David Wool. I didn't talk to him right away. He wasn't there. Actually, I had to wait quite a while. Somebody said, you know, wait around, he'll be back. And so I talked to him, and he liked the work that I was doing. It was very influenced by Mark Silvestri, so it fit that way. And he said, you know what, we have I want to say an internship program. It wasn't even really so much a program. I thought I'd be going down to Top Cow. They were in San Diego, and it would be this whole like real process. You are now an intern, and you know, here's where you are in your I don't know what I expected, but it was much more informal. So I got a 3-month internship, which is basically like a trial period for them to see how it's going to work. And I spent that whole 3 months in abject fear. And it wasn't really. It took me about 6 months to actually kind of get my feet under me. And I had one of the other artists who had been around at Top Cow for a long time say, yeah, you know, it's a good thing your work has kind of come together a bit, because they were really looking at letting you go. I'm like, wow, thanks, man. I feel great. Appreciate that, buddy.
One piece of artwork that you've done that's your favorite?
I guess my X-Men 200 cover. It's a huge 4-piece, like gatefold kind of a cover. I spent 3 weeks almost on it. Danny Mickey inked it. So I'm going in with my Posca right now. I'm just cleaning things up. Like here, I don't think that worked. Got a bit of a line there I don't like. That got a little lumpy. And I've known, the whole time I've been doing this, I've known that there are places where I was unhappy with how it came out. And, you know, I wait until I'm, for whatever reason, ready to use my whiteout, and then I just drop it all in at once, generally. And I tend to forget things, but I figure if I can't see it, I'm gonna have to go back in. This is my better paper, but it's still kind of soaking in and making a mess, so I'll have to let it dry.
How much of this process of what you're doing right now is autopilot?
Quite a bit. Quite a bit is autopilot. Especially now. If you would ask me when I was laying it out, it was actually a little more stressful. You know, I was really trying to think and talk and read comments at the same time, and that was not so much autopilot.
Awesome. Yeah.
It is awesome that I have help. Yes, thank you.
And your kid.
Yeah.
So, Jesus Nieves wants to know how long it took you to get your art style.
It took me 3 years. Really, before I thought, okay, I actually have something that, you know, it wasn't perfected, and it wasn't, you know, and it just changed over time. I really never even intended for it to change a lot of times when it did. But for me to say, okay, you know, I feel like I have a style that I'm jumping everywhere where it's not even on the screen, I'm so sorry. I started looking at Simon Bisley, and that's actually when things started coming together for me at Top Cow, and I was feeling more confident. I started to have a style that, while it wasn't realized, it was kind of going somewhere, and it was holding together, and it wasn't just looking like a really bad copy of Mark Silvestri. And then from there, I loved Dale Keown's work. He was doing Pit at the time, and I started copying a lot of his rendering. And I struggled so much with rendering, I just couldn't make it work. And once I had a basis with Simon Bisley, the way he constructs his black shapes, it gave me enough that I could go from there and then start to add some rendering to it, and it was starting to work for me. I was feeling better. And then Travis Trest is an incredible artist, and I was a huge fan for years, and I never had the guts to try and do any of the kind of thing that he was doing. And I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna give it a shot and see what happens. I mean, why not, you know? So I just brought out a sketchbook, and well, that's not true. We used to get free paper from Top Cow. I just took paper. We're not supposed to do that, but and yeah, I just started working with his stuff, and it actually was working for me. And I never pulled off anything close to Travis, but it did actually, with what I already had, it just kind of meshed. And it was that time that I did Ascension. It was 1997, and that book was a big success at the time. It did really great. So, you know, all of a sudden I was feeling like I'm actually, you know, going to be able to make this work, and it's not going to be a fiasco. I was so afraid of going home and saying, yeah, well, I tried, you know.
Do you think there's an age where it's too late? I don't know how to draw comics or again. 32.
No, there is no age where it's too late. There really isn't. The thing about getting into comics is you will not start out making a lot of money. That's just a fact. And so it makes it much easier. The reason you see so many younger people do it is they can make those sacrifices. They don't have a family to provide for. And so, you know, they can afford to. I worked for a year for $100 a week for food money. So, you know, that's a real thing to think about. Now, that's unusual. Generally, you'll do a little better than that. But yeah, it's the sacrifice of saying, okay, I'm just going to commit to this, and it's not going to pay. You know, when you're older, you've got a job that pays well, and you know, how do you find the time? Let's say you are a firefighter during the day, or an accountant, or whatever it is. How do you then go home after working all day and then put in the major time commitment of drawing a comic? Because it is a major time commitment, and if you are willing to do that and put that time into it and really devote, you know, not just into working when you get work, but just into studying, you absolutely can do it. And it is absolutely worth it. I mean, consider the time that you're putting into learning, like school. You know, if it takes you a few years to really start to get comfortable and do the kind of work that gets you some attention, well, it's no different than the time that you would devote to schooling. And you should look at it, I think, the same way. I don't necessarily think going to an art school is the best idea, just because I mean, I think you can learn so much, but it's not necessary to get work. Nobody looks at your degree at all. It's not a factor. So you really want to bear that in mind. And I think if you're younger, it's probably a better idea to go to school for business. Artists tend to not be the best business people.
I want to hear more about Mike Turner and your relationship, and maybe some Top Cow stories.
Mike started 2 months after I did, And he had actually, I mean, he had a great start. Like he was incredibly talented. So he learned so fast. It really made a lot of people upset, including me. But when he started, Mark Silvestri had a background artist that really didn't work out. I don't know what happened. The stuff just was unusable, and he penciled so hard. It wasn't somebody in the studio. I don't know where he found him. Anyway, Mark had to go back and fix everything himself. It was a real nightmare because the guy penciled so hard. It was basically impossible to erase. And we weren't using, like, there was no option to go on the computer and fix it that way at the time. And so they started looking through samples for a background artist for Mark, and all the rest of us, we actually got hired as artists. And I did backgrounds for Mark early on. That's actually my first credit. But Mike was the first artist that was hired specifically for that. And I remember when he found that out, he was a little concerned, because he thought, is this all that they're gonna want me to do here? But I think he did backgrounds for maybe an issue, if that, half an issue even. He developed so quickly. I remember the time that blew me away the most. Mark sat us down, and I'm going to give this exact lesson coming up in a video, and showed us how to draw buildings and how to make things look dimensional and how to use lighting and negative space instead of drawing every line and really filling things in. And Mike went from drawing almost like a marshmallow, because he had never drawn a building, to drawing, and he just came up, I mean, an hour later with this outrageously, like, perfect. It was incredible. It was amazing. And we all just went up to Mark's desk and looked at it and were dismayed. He was a great guy. He actually sat in the studio. I sat out facing into the room. He was in the corner with his desk facing me, right beside me, for years. So yeah, we worked together side by side for a long time. Really, we moved studios in, I think it was 98. So from 94 to 98. And when we moved studios, Mark was doing Fathom. He wanted to take that in his own direction and start his own company. And so he moved on. It was a shame. I mean, we still saw him all the time. He still came by the studio, but we didn't see him quite as much after he'd moved on. It was still a very tight community down there. Like, all the guys from Extreme Studios, that was Rob Liefeld's company, would come by, and we would go down and visit them. And Wildstorm, went to Wildstorm once to check that out. And actually, before, when I first went to Top Cow, we were still in San Diego. And Jim Lee was in the office. Scott Williams was there. J. Scott Campbell was there. Travis Trest. Not as many people know Travis, which is a shame, because I think he's incredibly talented. And so, yeah, I worked along all those guys for a little while, and then we moved off into our own studio. But we were in LA. It was 2 hours away. We would just, go up the road and go visit for, a day and have dinner and hang out with everybody. Like, we were all friends, and that's something I really, really miss is, I see artists at conventions and you make friends, but it's never the same as when you see people all day, every day. It's almost like, it's like a real brotherhood.
I know this is a question that probably relate to more point to, but for people who it's not as intuitive from art point of view, how do you know when to stop adding detail?
Okay, the number one way I know to stop adding detail is, you know what? There are a few ways. Deadline, that's a big one. And okay, watch this. I just want to say, I drew ink and I splattered it with my hand, and also it came on. I don't know what's going on. I think I might need to move on from that pen, and I've got a few of them. Just didn't go on well. But I can go back on with this pen. I cannot do this with any other whiteout that I've used. So I can just clean it up, which is great. But anyway, as far as adding detail goes, I just do black shapes, and I render when I have the time, which is generally now. So there's that. And then I know that I want areas that are light, like this whole area of the leg here. is in the light, so I don't want a ton of rendering in the way there, or this area of the arm is in the light, and so what I'm doing is rounding up toward the light, and so I know that guides me in where to put the rendering. And then it also, the other factor is, like, I'm gonna render his belt right now, and I want the whole thing to be a little bit dark. You know what, I'm gonna use my pen that hasn't been working the best. Let's see if I can get that worked. And I'm gonna crossways render, and I'm doing this just to kill this whole thing back and push it in so it's further out of the light, but I don't want it to just be black. So I'm just doing that with it. And then I want to make sure, just like with my shadow shapes, I want my rendering to scale. So bigger shapes will have bigger rendering, but I don't want something to have this big blatant rendering and other things to be, you know, way too small. And so some of my rendering is really based on the rendering around it, just to try and balance it. But I really have been debating with myself. I tend to really like rendering, and I can kill a picture. I've done it many, many times. And I kind of almost think you have to kill some pictures with rendering and learn what works and what will just close up too much and just get overworked. It's kind of an experience thing a little bit too. But I know that I want this to softly round up here, and so I render there and then leave it. But most importantly, before I ever render a picture, I want it to be a complete picture without rendering. I want to make sure that everything works and the whole thing holds together and it makes sense before I throw all my work on top of it.
Poor Alexander Art feels like if he goes to sleep, he's gonna bend you.
Oh, not at all. I'm sorry that it's going so late.
Yeah,
Please.
I've only got 19% left.
We're getting toward the end, and you know what, this will be up on YouTube. I don't want to encourage anyone to leave, but certainly please, you know, I do hope that while you've been watching, you've been enjoying, and if you are, you know, getting to the end and you need to wake up in the morning, yeah, this will be up on YouTube and you can watch it later on. And I certainly won't be offended. I'm just really very grateful that you came. And we're getting close to being finished. So I'm just glad we're back, so at least I can finish with you guys here rather than wrapping this up on my own. So somebody said, I was talking about Jim Lee, and the first time I met Jim Lee, it was in San Diego at the studio, at Homage Studios, and he was drawing it was a Savage Dragon issue. There was a time when Wildcats went to Eric Larson, Jim Lee did an issue of Savage Dragon, Mark Silvestri did an issue of Spawn. It was a cool month. And so yeah, he was drawing a page with Savage Dragon on it, and I remember watching him draw it, and he would never erase. And it was like a machine. It was incredible. And I'm sure that you guys have seen him draw online now. At the time, there was no way to see that. So it was my first exposure to it. And I remember thinking when I went to California as a young artist, I seriously thought I was the greatest artist that ever lived. I really did. I thought it was, because I had no frame of reference, you know? And yeah, the first time I watched Jim Lee draw, I realized that that was not the case. And then about a day later, I was doing my layouts on image paper, and this stuff was really high quality. It was good paper. Thank you very much, Ken. Can I draw Death's Head too? That would be a lot of fun. Actually, I would really enjoy drawing Death's Head. I have never drawn him either. I was drawing pages on or layouts on expensive image paper, and Jim Lee said, no, you can't do that. He brought me over to where the photocopy paper was and said, if you're doing layouts, draw it on there. And I thought, oh man, that's Jim Lee. I just got caught wasting the expensive paper. He said, this stuff's $2 a sheet. This stuff over here is a penny. I'm like, okay, sorry. Henry, I think what character I would like to draw but I haven't yet. I have drawn almost every character, certainly like at least once, almost every character. But a character I would love to do a series of, and that I probably will never get the chance to, realistically, would be Lobo. I love Lobo. That would be an absolute blast. I'd love to do it with Keith Giffen. He's, you know, he wrote all of my favorite stuff with Simon Bisley. I don't know how well I could pull off humor, so it would be a bit of a different Lobo book, though. I might end up hating my own version, but I would love to give it a try. Black Manic Arts. Drawing rocks is so relaxing. It never gets old, and once you get comfortable with it, you can just sit on the phone or on a live stream and just talk and just relax.
You're supposed to be autofocused.
Yes, is it not focused?
There it is.
Oh, okay.
Focus on your hand and for.
I never normally set it to autofocus, but I was afraid that I'd be moving the camera around, so I didn't want to lock it. But I never did move the camera, so next time I will make sure that it's locked focus, so that won't happen. This is a learning process. And so now, just to finish, I'm just gonna kind of shadow out down here a little bit just to shade this away from the light. And for next week's drawing, I have a Discord. I mentioned earlier on, I'm going to put up a question. I don't know how to do polls, unfortunately, but I'm going to put up a question and ask for what character to draw next week. And next week will be pencils. Since it was inks this week, I'll make sure to do pencils. But yeah, if you have a character that you'd like to see drawn, whoever that character is, just let me know, and the character that gets the most votes is what we'll do next week. So I think it should be fun. As much as I love to draw Batman, it's nice to draw some different characters. All right, I'm gonna pull out. So there's the whole picture. Oh wait, it's got a whole leg we didn't finish. Don't worry, it'll be black. Find my brush. I can't find my brush. Oh, here we go. All right, here we go. I'm gonna call that done. 2 hours and 16 minutes. That is not bad. Not yet. So I'm gonna sign this right now, and thank you everyone so very much for coming and watching me draw and hanging out and all the great questions. I will see you guys next week, where we will be drawing the character of your choice. Just go to Discord. I'm gonna post a video tomorrow, a tutorial video on foreshortening. and I will make sure to put the Discord link in that video. So just, yeah, head on over to Discord and give me your suggestions. All right, so I think this is the part where I say, you know, like and subscribe and all that stuff. So, you know, please do. And most of all, thank you very much for being a part of this. This is the first stream. We had a few hiccups. I got a couple of phone calls. So, you know, it didn't go perfectly, but I think it went pretty well. And I had an absolute great time. So thank you very much again. And I will see you guys next time.